Parks and Recreation Commission special video meeting. This meeting will be in a workshop format for the commission to provide input toward the Recreation Recovery Reset Plan. I'm Roy Westberg, Parks and Recreation Commission Chair. In accordance with Proclamation 20-2810 and the Governor's Extended Safe Start Order, tonight's Parks and Recreation Commission meeting is using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being recorded and will be broadcast live via Zoom and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel later this evening. City staff Ryan Daly, Paul West, Tammy Bodmer, Merrill Thomas-Schatt, Katie Herzog, Council Member Liaison Jake Jacobson, and consultant Emily Moon are participating in tonight's meeting remotely. Other public audience members are listening to the meeting by telephone or via the internet. Welcome to all and thank you for joining us tonight. Commissioners, please turn on your microphones and will city staff please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair Westberg. Chair Westberg?
Here.
Vice Chair McCarthy?
Here.
Commissioner Richter?
Here.
Commissioner Cohen?
Here.
Commissioner Gualtieri?
Here.
Commissioner Birkenwald? And Commissioner Struck?
Here.
Thank you.
Commissioners, before we start the business portion of the meeting, I'm going to go over the usual set of rules we've been following to help the meeting run smoothly. So if a commissioner has a question, please use the raised hand feature. I notice on my computer, it's showing up in a different place. It might be on yours too. It's down there at the bottom of the screen. But press the raise hand feature and you'll be called upon in the order you raise your hand. Everyone will be asked to limit him or herself to one question and one clarifying question if necessary, so that each commissioner has a chance to ask a question before a commissioner is given another chance to ask a question. Additionally, prior to speaking, please state your name for those who are listening in on the meeting. Tonight's agenda will not include in-person public appearances in accordance with Proclamation 20-20.11 and the Governor's Extended Safe Start Order. However, individuals wishing to speak live during the appearance portion of our meeting may do so by telephone or by using the Zoom teleconferencing application, provided, however, that they registered their desire to speak with the city admin staff by 4 p.m. today. Our city admin staff will call you by name or telephone number when it is your turn to speak. This is the opportunity for anyone to speak to the Parks and Recreation Commission. All remarks will be addressed to the commission as a whole and not to individual commission members or staff members. If any person makes personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, or becomes boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive while addressing the commission, I will request that that person leave the meeting. When it is your turn to address the commission, be sure to speak audibly and state your name for the record. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. I will provide you with a 30-second and a 15-second warning when your time is about to expire. City staff, is there anyone who has signed up for appearances that wishes to address the commission?
Yes, there is, Chair Westberg. Sue Stewart will be presenting this evening. Just
Okay.
one moment and I will bring her in.
Okay, thank you very much. Sue, go ahead. Unmute your mic and go ahead and start.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
I'm Sue Stewart, and I'm serving as president of Friends of Luther Burbank Park. I'm here to talk about illegal activity by mountain bikers in Upper Luther Burbank Park. They're burrowing under out soil under 100-year-old firs that are outside the strict boundaries in order to build bigger jumps. Recently, older people, I'd say in their 20s or 30s, are being defiant. This past week, I was yelled at by one of the older influencers saying he has a credit card and he'll bring as many shovels as the kids want. Here's a history lesson. I've been an advocate for these young boys up until now. I've lived near the park for more than 40 years. It has always been a small BMX track made by youth and free to the kids. This summer, it had been expanding. I talked with the current youth and they offered their names and contact emails, and I was really hopeful. In October, Kim Frappier with Parks Department met with the boys. Amy Rickert was there, some parents, and myself representing Friends of Luther Burbank Park. The boys were told they were riding outside the set boundaries. It was good for a while, but by December 21st, Kim had to send out a warning that boundaries were not being observed. The youth were asked to have the bad actors stop, and a new meeting was set for this coming March. Well, I think March is too far off. In my opinion, the areas should be closed for a timeout until after school's winter break, which is the mid-February week, and the area in the meantime needs to be reviewed. I would like to invite Chairman Rory Westberg and Council Member Jake Jacobson to review the bike jumps along with city staff. We lost a number of trees with this past windstorm in Upper Luther Burbank Park. There are 8 trees within their jump area where the roots may be compromised. Right now, they are damaged. Timeout and a loss of privileges are in order. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get into the agenda for tonight's meeting, I just wanted to update the commission on the status of the formation of the Luther Burbank Dock subcommittee. Commissioner Struck and Commissioner Gualtieri have graciously and enthusiastically agreed to join the committee along with me. So that will be our committee of 3. And Peter has agreed to, Commissioner Struck has agreed to chair that group. So we will be working with Paul West to set up as many as 4 meetings over the next few months, working with the consultant. These meetings will be open to the public as we try to narrow down the whole range of choices to a preferred alternative that we would bring back to the full commission by April or May. So that's the status of that. And because this meeting tonight is focusing specifically on the issue of the restart plan, the concern that Sue Stewart raised, I think, is one that we would likely want to take up down the road. And so Commissioner McCarthy and I will work with staff to see when we can build that discussion into an agenda for an upcoming meeting, if that works with everybody. That's okay. Hold your thumb up. Okay, great. So with that, I will turn the agenda over to the Operations Transition Team Manager, Ryan Daly, and Consultant Emily Moon.
Thank you, Chair Westberg. I do want to add to Ms. Stewart's comments that staff will be immediately and continuing to look into the issues that are arising out there. So I don't want it to come across as we're waiting as a commission. Staff is operationally looking at that at this time. So I just wanted to clear that up so that you all understand where we are in that process from an operational standpoint. Additionally, I just want to add that Jason Kittner, our Chief of Operations, is also on the call tonight, or on the meeting, so he will be available for any questions that may arise as well. Before I hand it off to Emily Moon, I would like to thank the commission for all of the work that went into preparing for this meeting that was relatively close to our last meeting. Thank you for the time that you put in. It it assisted staff and our consultant in compiling the information and preparing for this. So again, thank you sincerely for the time that you dedicated outside of these meetings. So with that, I would like to hand the presentation over to our consultant, Emily Moon, who has been working with us since October on this project.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Hello, Commission. I should say hard-working Commission. Thanks for having me back. And I'm looking forward to tonight. We do have a workshop, so there will be time on our agenda to discuss some topics and have kind of open conversation. So I'm looking forward to that dialogue. I have several slides that I'm going to go through before we get to one of those moments. And I want to be upfront about that. It's really important to get some background information out about why we're doing this, why we're approaching it the way that we're doing it, define some terms, help the public understand the exercise that you've done offline and how we're carrying that forward here tonight. So hang tight with me while we go through some of that background. I'm going to try to go at a clip so that we can actually get to the discussion period. And I have built in some points in time where I will pause and ask if there are any questions. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. How's it looking? Okay, great. Thank you for that. All right. So all of you know that we're calling this the reset plan, and I've explained why we're using that term. We're going to build back, but a little differently as we go. So I wanted to make sure that we introduced the team. We did this last time, but the reset team is myself, your remaining recreation staff, that's Ryan, Merrill, and Katie. And I put in our roles. Those are the same roles we had on screen on the 7th for you. In a nutshell, our role is to develop some recommendations for the reset. How do we bring back some programs or startup activities of recreation and those that would take place at the Community and Events Center. And then of course, you're part of our team as well. And your job is really to review those draft plans, provide some recommendations and input, synthesize information as it comes in, and get ready to help us pass along some recommendations to the City Council. And I'll remind everyone that we did have an introduction to the project on January 7th. So if anyone in the public is listening and wants to go back and learn more, that would be a good resource. So I put this slide in because I know when you're facing big projects and you're thinking about long-term and philosophies, there's a little bit of discomfort there in trying to figure out a plan and try to figure it out very quickly. So I wanted to acknowledge that we have about 2 months to learn together, to listen, to discuss, and then to get ready to provide some recommendations. You are not doing that in a vacuum. You will be getting some public engagement. We talked about that. That's going to be ongoing. We have a lot of past data and input from the public to utilize as well. And yet, you are the Parks and Recreation Commission. So we are very much focused on working directly with you in this short time period to make some of those recommendations. And then lastly, I'd remind you that none of these products are in stone. We will be revisiting them over time, making tweaks as community interests and demands and priorities change. And so we're going to put our best foot forward. Our goals for the workshop tonight are to learn about the cost recovery model. We'll explain why that model is important to this project. We're going to discuss the outcomes for the reset project, what we have in mind. And in doing so, we will then be expressing some overall outcomes or goals for recreation in the community center. And then we're going to get down to a detail level where we're starting to identify some cost recovery targets and share some ideas about pricing strategies. Although on that latter point, most of that work will come in February. So City Manager Bond's first directive to us was, let's figure out how to start up some services. And of course, inherent in that, there are lots of questions to consider. This project tries to go kind of piece by piece in identifying those questions. Where we started was thinking about what do we have? What are we working with? And as you know, and as we talked about on the 7th, there's limited financial and staffing resources available right now, but you have a tremendous physical asset in the community center, a new and dedicated commission, a very supportive community who values recreation and the community center, and a lot to work with. So while we have some limitations, there's a good foundation there. And our goal is just to identify kind of how we're going to get there. So our project has its own goals and expectations, and these were developed with the project team and in conversation with the city manager about what was needed. First and foremost, our goal is to improve the financial sustainability of these services. We want to be deliberate about which programs we're going to offer in the future, have a strategy in mind for which programs we choose. And we're going to leverage our strengths and our assets because that will help us to, in the future, deliver either more services or better services or higher quality services if we can really maximize those strengths. We also want to create some greater clarity about who's benefiting from the services and therefore perhaps who should be paying for them. And last, but probably most importantly, we just want to develop a strategy. We want to have a strategic approach. And so for us, that has pointed toward developing this cost recovery and resource allocation philosophy. This just boils down that previous slide a little bit more, specifically relative to the philosophy. Our goals are to create that financial sustainability for the purpose of ensuring the stewardship and accessibility for all to your programs and your services and your building. And then finding that balance in a purposeful way between the community's investment in this area and the benefits that individuals receive from it. And then lastly, we want to make sure that everything that we do is aligned with the values and the goals of the city, of the department, of the community. So I've been using this term a lot. It's probably time to define it. What is cost recovery? So cost recovery is really about the degree to which those day-to-day operational costs are being supported by tax resources. And we often at the municipal level talk about that in terms of general fund support. So I'll use that term from time to time. Conversely, something that does not have strong cost recovery or may not have any cost recovery are programs that are subsidized. And so those are the ones that are supported in full or in part by the general fund, by taxes. And those programs and services can often be thought of as the community's investment in programs and services under the recreation or community center umbrella. So I am going to pause here and just ask if there are any initial questions before I go on. Okay, great. All right, then I will go to the next. I can get my cursor
Commissioner
right
Struck
place.
had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So just in regard to the definition of cost recovery, I understand how you define it. I think that it's a little bit narrow in the sense that there's really two components. One is what you discussed, which is kind of the operations and maintenance aspect of it, which, as you say, generally flows through the general fund and then other resources. But there's a second component, which is the capital investment. And while generally, you know, I'm sure we'll get into this, generally you don't think about that in terms of cost recovery, but I think it's important that we understand, not only the commission, but the community understand that component of it, because clearly as you use, you invest more in various projects, whether it be renovation or new things, that then if there are ongoing maintenance costs, pluses or minuses, that kind of feeds into that. So you need to understand that aspect of it too. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for bringing that up. That is important. We will be focused largely on operating costs and not the capital costs. And in addition, we're not focused on the parks side of Parks and Recreation. So not the maintenance aspects as much, although there's some facility maintenance that certainly we need to be cognizant of. The capital side often has some different funding sources too than the operating side. And so I agree with you that we should have some dialogue about cost recovery on the capital side, but we're gonna set that aside for now because there are some important differences in the capital budget than there are on the operating side. So for tonight, we're gonna talk about kind of the operating side of the house. All right. Just one quick note before we go on. This is not new to the city. The city has talked about cost recovery for at least a couple decades and has completed fee studies to establish some overall cost recovery goals. Those have largely been at the whole department level, occasionally at the facility level just for the community center. And so I just wanted to briefly let you know that this isn't new. What we are trying to do with this project is fully build out that model and build out the rationale and the structure for that model, and not just set a target, but really help to explain why. These policy questions, I'm not going to read out loud. These are the same policy questions that were listed on Let's Talk. We wanted to make sure that it was clear why we were taking on this project and what we were trying to get at. And so the Let's Talk policy questions helped, I hope, the community understand that we're having this dialogue about who should benefit and who should pay, and also what's the city's role and responsibility, and what do they need, what do they want from all of that. That survey is open until February 16th. More specifically though, I wanted to raise some key questions with regard to cost recovery and resource allocation philosophy. And all of these are important. All of these are questions that we will touch on as we do this work in one way or another. I think one of the primary questions though, that we need to ask at this point as we're building back up and trying to bring in resources in order to then provide, is that last question about spreading resources too thin and not being able to sustain core services. So that's one of the ones that we'll continue to come back to over time. Second group of questions that I just wanted to get out there so that you know this is part of our mental framework as we're approaching the project. There are many potential policy questions that could develop as we go, and we'll continue to discuss them as we make progress on this. But a lot of these have to do with kind of the mechanics, the values that are involved in cost recovery and creating a resource allocation philosophy. I want to pause one more time before we start getting into the model itself and a little bit more background information. Are there any questions?
I saw a hand up from Peter. Is that just from last time, or do you have a follow-up, Commissioner Struck?
Okay.
I lowered it.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so moving on, I wanted to give you just a little bit of background. We have been really busy crunching some numbers and kind of taking the pulse on what was our financial performance in the past, what did cost recovery look like. We're learning from that, trying to apply that as we go forward. But I thought this was interesting. In the past, and we put this on Let's Talk as well, this information that's in the box, 57% of the funding resources for recreation and the community center came from taxes. On the right-hand side, you see some statistics from the National Recreation and Parks Association. And you can see that's very similar. 60% typically nationwide comes from general fund tax support. I will tell you there's a little bit of apples and oranges here, because on the left, I'm just talking about recreation in the community center, and on the right, it does include funding sources that helped provide for parks in those communities. So I wanted to acknowledge that. Another good thing I see from this data is that 23% of the revenue that the city used came from leveraging that asset that you have, renting out the facility to groups or individuals, public, private. And so that's a really strong indication of the demand and of you maximizing that asset as well. 17% from user fees, people who are actually taking part in programs that are put on by the city or at the facility. Those two groups, the 23% and the 17%, is on the right-hand side what would make up the 24% earned generated revenue. And so the city is actually doing quite well on generating revenue from its programs and from its facility. On the right-hand side, there are some different revenue sources that the city of Mercer Island doesn't necessarily have on the recreation side of the house. But again, that's the apples and orange thing playing out, where in some communities they have dedicated levies or taxes that are set aside for things like open space acquisition or parks maintenance. So overall, I think Mercer Island is doing fairly well when it comes to cost recovery, but I think we can be more thoughtful about that approach. And so I wanted to share with you that nationwide for parks and recreation, what we see is about a 27% cost recovery level. In Mercer Island, on the recreation and community center side, in 2019, it was at 42%, and that's very close to being in the top quartile for the country. Now, if we included the parks expenditures and revenue side, I think that 42% would go down, but I think it still would be above what the national rate is. So I just wanted to share that good news, and it's a nice foundation to build upon. So now we're going to get started on actually building our cost recovery and resource allocation philosophy. I wanted to introduce a model that we're going to be using here. It was developed by an organization called Greenplay LLC, and they are a company that has helped parks and recreation departments all across the country, big and small, big districts, tiny towns. And their model is, I think, very intuitive. And as I was thinking about cost recovery and my experiences with that, and I was writing down the basics of what I know to be fundamental, I was doing some online research, and I saw that Greenplay had been used in many communities, including several in Washington. And so I thought that might be a nice place to start. And they have been gracious enough to allow me to use bits and pieces, including an illustration, a graphic that I think helps us to picture the model that we're going to use. And so I wanted to give them credit for this. So on the left-hand side, that is Greenplay's typical process, the things that they do in sequence when they are helping a community. We are going to do many of the same things, but we have a very different situation here than Greenplay encounters when they go and help other cities. We are not currently and simultaneously delivering services at this moment. we don't have our full complement, for example, of staff or the full budget that ultimately we would need in order to deliver programs and services to the community. And so there's a little bit of difference. But we will be having some conversation about these different elements. I'm going to talk more about them as we go forward tonight. So one of the things Screenplay talks about is having some clarity on what mission, vision, and values are for the organization before you start doing this work or for the community. And Mercer Island has all of that. I have spliced in some that is specific to Parks and Recreation and some that is at the city-wide level. For example, the department had not clearly nor concisely expressed values. So we're using the city's values here, keeping all of these in mind as we go forward. And we'll have more conversation about this as we go too. One thing I certainly am keeping in mind is how happy residents have been with the quality and quantity of the services that were provided before the pandemic. So certainly I can see the city was doing some great things and those were well received. And so going forward, our goal is to continue to have that high rate of satisfaction, but we also understand that it is different now and that we can't really sustain the past approach, which I will say was more an additive approach. You know, what's the next thing that we can add, the next program or service? We're going to be thoughtful first about what we deliver, but we're going to spend more time going forward, really analyzing what's needed, what works, how the pieces all relate to each other. And just to underscore that point of continuing to try to do it all, I took a look at recreation brochures from the last few years and kind of totaled up how many distinct programs or events were being offered every season since you produced that brochure on a seasonal basis. And there were 60 plus different activities or events. Some of those activities were offered, of course, multiple times, 3 times a week or something, and I only counted them once. So that's a lot, and that's wonderful. That's wonderful, but I think, again, we're going to try to be really thoughtful about making sure that we're serving the community in the way that it needs and wants to be served, and that all of that is sustainable. One of the things that felt absent to me is there wasn't a clear discussion of core services for recreation or the community events center. So that is another place that we'll probably come back to over time. We'll keep touching on that, trying to identify what the core services are for the city. That's a definition that is debatable. People will have their own definition. I've put a definition there at the bottom that is commonly used by governments. So that it often means that those are the services that the city is required or compelled to deliver. But it can also mean services that are expected, and expected because they aren't usually delivered by some other entity. So that's often the way that core gets defined in municipalities. And I just listed a few examples of the assets that we have. I think we have some good identification of the assets, but a little less on the core services side. And again, these are a couple of the steps that are in that model that we're using. So the big question everybody wants to get to is, what are we going to do? What are we going to offer? Which programs and activities should we provide? And we will begin to do that work, but we're starting not at that place. We're starting from a little higher elevation, I think. And by clarifying how we're going to try to achieve outcomes that we desire, we're going to bring into focus what is really core or essential to do. I also have been talking with the team about thinking about core in a little nuanced way, thinking about how defining core services or essential services fits with this cost recovery resource allocation philosophy. And I think a good way to think about that is putting potential programs and services into kind of three buckets. One being a bucket of what is the public good and social core. So those are the programs that are quality of life, kind of programs for the city. And then the second bucket would be the business sustainability core. And as we'll talk about on cost recovery, you really want that business sustainability core to be assisting your ability to deliver on the public good social core. And then the last bucket isn't necessarily core, but it helps keep life in all of your programs and interest and meet community demand. And those are the non-essential desirable programs and services. And so I'm going to take another quick break. I'm going to ask if there are any questions or just initial thoughts about core services. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can take just a few minutes to do that.
Commissioner Cohen has a question, and then Commissioner Richter, and then Commissioner Gualtieri.
Hi, thank you, Rory. This is Don Cohen. I didn't follow the business sustainability category, what that means. I understand that it's something to do with cost recovery, but I didn't grasp it yet, and maybe I'm just going to wait.
Sure. So Commissioner, thank you for that question. What I would say is I hope that's going to become a little bit more clear as we talk about the exercise that all of you did. There are certain activities that will generate more revenue than is needed to provide those services. And so those might be business core services that you say it's essential that we offer these services because they actually provide some revenue that helps us provide the public good services that may be either higher cost or lower revenue kinds of programs. And then also business sustainability services are those back of house kinds of services that you have to have the management, the administration of the programs.
Commissioner Richter, you put your hand down. Did you still want to ask a question?
I had the same question as Don.
Okay, thanks.
Great.
Commissioner Gualtieri.
Yeah, can you give us an example of what might be some core services on Mercer Island? You said you found that we were kind of lacking, or what? I have no idea. Like, it's just because we're so close to a major urban area, you know, like you can get everything here. I mean, not here on Mercer Island, but you know, and like Ryan was talking about this at the last meeting, you know, the number of fitness centers on Mercer Island is like incredible. And then you could go to Bellevue and Issaquah and Seattle. So
Right.
What might be an example of that for us?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There are value and judgment statements that can be made, and going out on that plank, I will say. So I think that is for us to wrestle with as we go through this exercise. So I won't speak of Mercer Island per se, but what I would say is I have worked in communities that have had maybe more substantial number of individuals with special needs, and there was no other provider for that. And so using that definition I gave you tonight, in those communities, they have felt that it was core for them to provide, essential for them to provide services for those individuals, because those individuals weren't able to receive services from any other entity than the city government. Did that help? So I didn't tell you what Mercer Islands are. Mercer Island has a huge long list of programs and services it provides, but the work hasn't been quite done to prioritize that or to categorize it in any way. And so that is part of what we're going to be doing.
This is Commissioner Westberg, just following up on Lynn's question. You know, we heard the other night in our meeting with the city council that individual council members expressed informally, but strong support for programs that served our senior citizens, that served families and children, that served people with special needs, things like that. Although those may not have been or aren't identified anywhere as core services of the department, they would seem to be certainly on the minds of council members.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I listened to that meeting as well. I heard that. I think your PROS survey and a lot of past data and input is helpful in identifying where there's greatest demand and where your residents find greatest value. Then it just becomes, if everything is named or seems to be on equal footing, how do you drill down from there? So that's part of what we will wrestle with a little bit, but all of that input that we're receiving through PROS will continue to be helpful. I am not suggesting that tonight or even with this project that we are going to have to label things in those buckets, but I do think it's a helpful activity. I think you should do it in concert with the work that's being done on PROS. It's not necessary to label things as core or not core in order to do the cost recovery and resource allocation philosophy that we're trying to construct. Okay, ready?
One follow-up question from
Sure.
Commissioner Gualtieri.
This is Lynn Gualtieri. It's actually not a follow-up question. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to ask another question or.
Go for it.
A totally different question. Okay, so back to your slide about the national, you sort of compared Mercer Island to national cost recovery for Parks and Rec, and we were at like 43% versus 26%, you know, and you said, that's great, but is it possible that we're charging too much for things? I mean, what's our goal? What's our target? Do we want to, is our target 50% or like, where's the balance of, are things actually becoming unaffordable?
Right. Well, and there was danger in showing that statistic because I told you it was apples and oranges. I think if we brought in the parks element into the Mercer Island side, you'd see costs going up and revenues not, you don't have a lot of dedicated park revenues that offset those costs. So I think our number in Mercer Island is probably above the average, but closer to the national average. Having said that, one of the deliverables on this project is going to be to do kind of a fee study and look at whether our fees are appropriate, given a bunch of different factors. And so we'll have that discussion. The other thing that I would say about assessing whether our fees are appropriate is, what do you want those fees to do? We have to answer that question first. And what is it we want to provide, and how expensive is that, or how capable is it to generate revenue? That's the work that we're going to be doing through cost recovery. We're going to be talking about what kinds of programs and services in a big macro sense do we want to provide, and how are those going to support each other so that we have this sustainable complement of services for the community. That will also help inform us about what we need to charge for some activities in order to provide others.
If I could just add to that, Ryan Daly, Operations Transition Team Manager. Our community is a little bit unique in that we have the Community and Event Center, which is an outstanding asset that recovers a significant amount of revenue from a rental standpoint compared to maybe neighboring venues or some of it, for sure, those national averages. I mean, our facility is top of the line compared to a lot of other community centers. So that is something to think about, as well as the quality of assets that we do have and how that may influence those numbers.
Thank you, Ryan. You had my back on that. I was supposed to mention that was a key difference too. Yeah, not every community has an event center that's able to bring in those private groups that you can rightfully so get some revenue from for using your facility. It's a good point.
Commissioner McCarthy has a question.
Sure.
Sorry, I just had a comment, Jody McCarthy. I was wondering that too, about how many communities actually have a community center that, you know, as one of their assets, and where that puts us on it. So thank you for clarifying that, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think community centers are not too uncommon. An event center having the capacity to rent out that kind of space is. Great. All right. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. If I can get my cursor over there again. How we doing? See it? Okay, thank you. All right. We're going to now start talking about that model, the cost recovery resource allocation model. And it is a tool that we will use to help us kind of sort through how that complement of programs and services will work together, and what we will deliver, and who will benefit from it, and who will pay for it, and what is required of the department to provide. And so there are different ways of looking at providing services. This model really focuses on a filter, a way of looking at that that revolves around benefit. So who is receiving the benefit of the service, and what does that benefit look like? So we kind of sort the programs and services and their level of cost recovery, the expectation for that, based on what we call the benefits filter. There are other filters that come into play and that we are mindful of, but the biggest decision weight is really on the benefit filter. So this is that graphic that Greenplay has graciously allowed me to utilize with all of you. And it's a pyramid. The model has a tier for 5 tiers, a tier for each classification of program or service. And it demands that we sort potential or current programs and services into those tiers based on the application of that benefits filter. So thinking about who is benefiting. Again, other filters matter, but we do the initial sorting based on the benefit. There are other influential factors and considerations when we think about how to sort and classify programs and services, and when we think about what we're going to offer and when. These are all important too. And sometimes they become a more important piece of information as we're thinking about what to deliver. So I want to acknowledge that. We will, from time to time, want to be responsive to trends. What is desired by the community next? Sometimes it's going to be important for us to really be mindful of how we can market a program, and what is the expectation for how many participants we will have in that program. We can't be blind to that. And then the last two really have to do with money. We also have to think about residents' ability to pay, like Commissioner Gualtieri spoke about. and the level that the city has to subsidize. And that ranges from 100% tax supported to those programs and services that might generate a little bit of money for the city and help us deliver other programs and services. So the team sat back and said, okay, we're ready to sort these programs and services into categories. What categories should we use? And there's sort of an exponential number that you could come up with. We narrowed it down to these 32 categories based on past services and programs that have been delivered in the community, but also kind of trying to think forward about, are there other things that other communities are doing that we're not necessarily doing in Mercer Island? And so we settled on these 32. This is not, again, etched in stone. We can add categories, we can delete, combine categories over time. And I wanted to just briefly define the tiers. All of you have received these definitions, but just for other people who are maybe trying to play along at home, I'll start with the bottom. The bottom is the foundational tier, tier number 1. And that tier really is about programs and services where the whole community benefits. And these programs and services can provide overall quality of life in the community. They can promote safety, address social needs, assist with health. And usually these are programs and services that are supported by tax dollars, if not wholly, pretty close to that. Minimal charges usually with these programs to the participants. And I think that's all I wanted to say on tier 2. On tier 1, on tier 2, now we're starting to introduce some benefits that may be reaped by individuals, not just the community as a whole. And you might find programs here where there's some skill development by the participants in these programs. Here in tier 2, we start to see maybe some more user fees or direct charges to participants. We'll talk about direct costs versus indirect costs, but typically the aim is to recover a percentage of direct costs. There are occasions where you will kind of charge against for indirect costs too. And there's some considerable community support or tax support for these programs as well. And tier 3 is kind of the balance point. It's where you can make an argument that there's both individual and community benefit. Programs may be designed to promote individual physical and mental well-being, may provide intermediate skill development, and the fees are set to recover more of the cost of providing that service than in tiers 1 and 2. On the 4th tier, you find programs that may be designed and held for specific groups in your community. Those might be just because there's kind of a prerequisite to have attained some basic skill before you participate. It may be the competitive programs or leagues that the city has. And those programs are typically placed at this level and indicated to recover their full direct costs. And then the top tier is a tier that acknowledges that those programs may generate additional revenue beyond their direct costs. So they may help to cover indirect costs. They may help to cover the direct costs of other programs and other tiers, or to reduce the amount of tax support that is needed to provide the other programs and services. And at that level, the benefit is really directly going to the individuals that are participating in those programs. There's less of a community-wide sort of benefit. So at this point, Chair Westberg, I thought this might be the best time to take, a very short break before we start talking about how we all have attempted to sort categories of programs and services into a cost recovery pyramid for Mercer Island.
You read my mind. So,
Excellent.
which isn't hard to do most times. So why don't we take a 10-minute break, and if everybody could be back by 6:35, and please silence your mic and also turn off the video to save some bandwidth.
Great.
So we'll see everybody at 6:35. Okay, thank you all for coming back promptly. Now we're ready to get to the fun stuff. So I'll turn it back over to Emily.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. So we did a little fun exercise. At least I hope it was fun. I know it was hard. At least it was hard for me. It was hard for the reset team. These are the instructions that we gave. I just wanted public to understand what the exercise was. We gave some guidance to all of the commissioners. That'll be on the next slide. And they reviewed and applied the definitions of the tiers, just as we've talked about. And then they sorted all the categories of services and programs into those tiers. The reset team aggregated the results. We're going to show you those results tonight, and we're going to discuss them and also the version that was done by the reset team so that we can compare. So here's the guidance that we gave the commission. In a nutshell, we said, think about who is benefiting and who should pay for those programs, and not about how much those individuals should pay. That comes in another phase of this project. One other piece of guidance that I wanted to point out is it's important at points in time as you're sorting these categories of programs and services to think about whether or not others benefit from the program or service that aren't necessarily the recipients of the program and service, or they're not the primary participant. So that's one piece that I know I had to keep coming back to occasionally as I was sorting things into my version of the pyramid. So here are the results. It's a lot of information on one slide. I know we're gonna drill down and show you just a piece of it in a second. But let me help explain what we have here. It's a bit of a heat map, although all in green. On the left-hand side are those 32 categories of programs and services. Ignore the shading for a second. On the right-hand side, we have the 5 tiers for cost recovery using the benefit filter. And the darker the green, the more of you identified that program or service for that particular tier. We had 6 commissioners participate, and so total hopefully on all these rows is 6. And then I'm going to turn your attention back to the left-hand side. Where I have used darker green shading is for every category of program or service that there was a strong majority consensus on placement on the pyramid. So I'm defining that as 4, 5, or 6 of you kind of said, I think it should go here. The lighter green, there's 3 programs that are in, or services in light green. Those are categories where there was pretty good agreement. 3 of you said this, you know, it should be tier X, and 3 of you said tier Y, but those tiers are adjacent to each other. And so I think we could spend a limited amount of time wrestling over that. So those also had fairly good agreement. And then the ones that have no shading, the ones that are in white cells, are the ones where your ideas about placement really varied. And those are the ones we're going to spend more time on tonight. So that's what I'm showing on this next slide. All of those where there wasn't strong majority consensus. And then below that gray line are the 3 programs or services that I said had the kind of split vote. So we're going to talk about those 2 groups, and we're also going to show you the reset teams pyramid and talk about where there's differences on those. So this is a fun part. And so I am going to just go line by line and kind of ask for all of you to weigh in if you have either a clarifying question, or if you want to advocate for a certain placement, or tell us your rationale, so that we can maybe get a better sense of where there might be consensus. My goal is to just get your input tonight and then go back with the reset team and let that inform us on a final product. So we will do the work of trying to synthesize where you land with where the team was, and then put forward a final version. One piece I wanted to just define real quick is there may have been some confusion over the category of program and service where we have listed public use versus exclusive use. I wanted to define that. Exclusive use, what we meant was any use of a facility, park, shelter, field, where there was some sort of pre-registration that would enable you to take part in that activity. It wasn't just open to all comers, the whole community, or where either of those facilities had been rented out for a private group, for their members or for whoever had registered for that program. It wasn't, no one could walk in off of the street and just take part in that activity. So that's the differentiation. Meryl had a great example that she spoke about with me today. You might think about even a quasi kind of private group like Rotary, who anyone could join their ranks, but they may hold two different events. They may hold a activity that is just for current members, or they may put on a community-wide open event. So that first example would be exclusive use, and the second would be some degree of public use. I'll go further and define that by saying on the fee structure, we can set out different fees for different types of public and different types of exclusive use. So the fees may also help to differentiate kind of who's benefiting, who's paying.
This is Ryan Daly, Operations Transition Team. I explained this wrong to each and every one of you. So please take Emily's comments there on how she defined it. I'll say that you were all explained from me in a different manner, sort of identifying those groups by how they allow access, but that's not the lens we're looking through in this situation.
Right. Again, who is benefiting?
Yes.
Okay, I was going to start with the first.
Excuse me, this is
yeah.
Don Cohen. I have my hand up. Would it be possible, just for a second, I know you want to focus on these that are more mixed result, but you went past the previous slide so fast that I wasn't able to sort of absorb it well enough.
Sure, I can go back.
Just go back to it and give me 60 seconds
Sure thing.
Just to look at the ones that you have in a dark green, right?
Correct.
Okay, because you guys have seen this a lot of times,
Yes.
because it helps me define the differences between this and the next slide, I think. Okay, okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So starting with the first one on this slide, adult advanced or competitive programs. We had a split vote here of one person who said it should be in tier 2, 2 in tier 4, 3 in tier 5. So it just, first glance, it looks like majority of you felt like it was more of an individual benefit type program, but looking for anybody to make a case for a particular tier.
Don, your hand is up. Did you want to, and then Jody?
Sorry.
Jody McCarthy. I had said 5 for that one, but I would be willing to put it back down to 4 because I think that's fair based on what you were just explaining about. I don't know about the other people that also put it into 5, but I would be willing to go down to 4 on that. I think that's fair.
Yeah, and this is Peter Struck. I'm in exactly the same boat as Jody. I put it as a 5, and as I thought about it since I submitted it, I would go with a 4 as well. And I guess that raises a kind of more general question. I've got, I don't know, a few of these that, as I sit today, I would say I would change my vote. So I don't know if that's allowed or how we should handle that.
Peter, this is Commissioner Westberg. Why don't we just deal with those as those instances as we discuss each item?
Okay.
And since I'm pressing down on my space bar, I will say I voted or put this one under category 4 because while there is considerable individual benefit, there's also, my feeling was there was benefit to the community for having adult recreation programs available.
Chair Westberg, I'll just share as we go that the reset team put this in tier 4, believing there's stronger individual benefit, but it's not quite the same as some of the activities that we put into tier 5.
Commissioner Cohen, you have a question.
Yes, Don Cohen. Well, I was the third person who put this in 5, and I don't feel strongly about it, but I would be okay with moving it to 4, particularly in light of what the reset team did and the comments that were just made.
Okay, anyone else want to weigh in on this, or shall I go to the next? Yeah.
Commissioner Strout, do you have a question on the next one?
Yeah, the adult, beginner, and intermediate programs.
Okay.
If we're there, yes.
And,
So I'm going to bat 1,000 here. So I actually have that as a 5, which in retrospect, I would move mine to a 3. And the reason why, if we think about the advanced being at 4, which I think is appropriate, kind of the beginner type things, I think there's probably more community benefit associated with that one of getting people involved in whatever activity it is. So I would move mine from a 5 to a 3.
Okay, again, for what it's worth, the reset team had this in tier 3 to complement the advanced competitive being in tier 4.
Commissioner Gualtieri, go ahead.
This is Lynn Gualtieri. Yeah, I guess I was looking at mine and just going back to the very first one. So yeah, I was the one who put the adult advanced in 2, but yes, I'd move that up now to 3 and move the beginner intermediate. I would also skew more to the 3 because I think your definition in a slide actually said the intermediate programs would be more of a 3. So.
Commissioner McCarthy, then Commissioner Cohen, and then Commissioner Richter.
So I had put the adult, beginner, intermediate in the 2, but I would totally be willing to go up to a 3 as well.
Oh, this is Don Cohen. Sorry, I didn't know that you were done, Jody. I had this one on 4, but given the way that I decided to change the advanced one, I would be okay with moving this to a 3.
And Commissioner Richter.
Hi, this is Amy Richter. I actually had it at a 3 and just wanted to share my thinking. I kind of looked at this like, while an individual may be benefiting by going to a program that they've never tried before, they're a beginner, I saw it as community because it's an offering that is a way to engage the broader community because you don't have to have any previous skill set to be part of that. And it's not exclusive or cut or anything like that. Very broad and opening to the community. So I gave it a 3.
Okay, great. I think I'll move on to boat launch. Super fun one. So let me speak to this just a little bit. You are all across the board, literally from the highest tier to the lowest tier. So I wanted to define this just a little bit and see if that helps. We are contemplating this program or service as being the sale of the permit that would allow you to launch your boat at the boat launch. This is not about necessarily members of the public coming down and being on the launch and having access to it. It's the sale of that permit. So it's that program that we had in mind. Having said that, I will already share with you that I'm going to double check that yes, indeed, the reset team put this in tier 5.
Commissioner Gualtieri, then Commissioner McCarthy.
This is Lynn Gualtieri. Yes, that changes everything for me then. I was one of the ones. I looked at boat launch and I just saw the word dock. So sorry. And I didn't know that you had, oh yeah, boat launch. Yeah, of course you gotta pay for that. Yeah, so whatever. I was a 1, sure, now I'd be a 5.
Jody McCarthy. I'm the same as Lynn. I put it as a 1. I was thinking of it as being something that we need, that we have for everybody to use. But now that that's not the case, I'm definitely would be in a 5 as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Richter. Amy, did you have a question?
Sorry, I was talking without my mute. Thank you for clarifying that. I too just thought of dock. I was looking at that, so that was good to see the boat launch use. And it makes sense why you'd say 5. I could go with that. Although there's this part of me that feels like, but yet it's an access point for the community. So the community at large can leverage this. So it's a little fuzzy for me. I mean, I'd be fine with a 5. It makes sense. But that's just what was going through my mind.
Okay, I think we can move on to the next one.
Great. That sounds good. Next is community-wide special events or open special programs. So these are ones with no pre-registration. This is everybody can come and enjoy whatever this community event might be. And
provide some examples for that, Ryan? Or...
Sure. Summer celebration, I think, is one. Ryan, do you want to help?
I'd love to help. Favorite. Yeah, summer celebration would be an example. Mostly music in the park could be another one. Yeah, those sort of community-wide events that the city is directly in partnership or coordinating.
Commissioner Richter, did you have a comment on this one?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so when I looked at that, I thought no barrier to entry. Anybody from the community is invited to attend. All ages, open to everybody. So I gave it a, I think I got to go look. I think I gave it a 1. I'm going to go look.
While Amy's looking, this is Commissioner Westberg, I'll add it for the same reasons I gave it a 1. I just felt that these are wide open events. It'd be difficult to monetize them and they benefit the entire community.
I'll take this opportunity to share. Reset team put it in 2. And I think the reason we did that, it's kind of 2 parts to it. Tier 1, we really reserved for those programs and services that we thought most heavily needed community tax support. again, back to thinking, trying to apply maybe what is essential and core. And tier 2, because we were also recognizing, even though tier 2 may not require any user fee or participant fee, because it would be open entirely to the community, there are potentially some community-wide special events that would generate revenue, or where you might have vendors participating in those activities, or something that might generate some offset to the tax support. And so for those 2 reasons, we thought it could live in tier 2.
Commissioner McCarthy, go ahead.
So I was the one person in 3, and I would be willing to go down to 2 on that one.
And
Thanks.
Commissioner Gualtieri.
This is Lynn Gualtieri. Emily, I'm curious, when you say you're talking about where the reset team put something, did you all work on this together, or do you mean you all did this individually and you all just agreed pretty much?
So our exercise was conducted in much the same way. We individually each took our stab at placing the categories, and then we had a conference call where we wrestled with how we were defining things and thinking about the tiers, and then kind of went through the same exercise about where do we have majority consensus and who can move which way. So I don't have the raw data with me, but I think we were pretty well clustered on this one, either in that 1 or 2 tier.
Commissioner Cohen.
Don Cohen. I put this in 1, and from the point of view of dollars, as Emily was talking about, I read this one maybe wrongly to read, is this something you would want to charge citizens for? Not that there would be vendors there and so forth and everything. So I put it in 1, and I'm not moving on that one. So.
Fair enough. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so on that one, we're taking notes, the reset team. I heard kind of, we're still a little split between 1 and 2. We will chat reset team and come back to you with a recommendation on that. For the sake of time, I'm going to move to drop-in self-directed sports. You had clustering around tier 2 and tier 3. This is the city just saying we're going to make available, for example, the gymnasium, and you can come in and either pay a nominal fee or no fee, and you can play pickup or practice in the gymnasium. That's an example of a drop-in sport. Anyone want to speak to that one?
Mr. Richter, go ahead.
Hi, Amy Richter. I gave this one a 3. Clearly, you're an individual. You go to the activity, you're getting benefit out of it. But the fact that it's a drop-in and anybody can go says there's community benefit. And I also think community happens. I would attend a lot of like the drop-ins at the gyms when my kids were young, in the gymnasium, and community was happening there. So I think there's a benefit for both. That's why I gave it a 3.
Commissioner McCarthy, go ahead.
Thank you, Jody McCarthy. I gave it a 3 as well, and I would keep it there. I think that is a both ways kind of a deal. So I'm happy with 3 on that one. Thanks.
And this is Commissioner Westberg. I think I gave it a 2. I don't have my sheet in front of me. I have my notes. So, and I gave it a 2 because I thought that I really considered that having a facility like the community center that offering drop-in self-directed sports was really kind of a core function of what Parks and Recreation should do, and therefore had considerable community development or community benefits, sorry.
Chair, I'll squeeze in and say that the reset team had this in tier 3. Again, we felt that it was balancing individual benefit and community benefit, and therefore also seemed like there should be shared payment on that.
Commissioner Struck, and then.
Yes, Peter sucks. Thank you. I just look at my sheet again. I had a 4, which I think based on the commentary from my colleagues and just thinking about it, that I would be fine at 3.
Commissioner Cohen.
Don Cohen, I had it in 2 for the same reason that Rory said, that I kind of viewed it as predominantly community benefit.
Chair,
Okay, any other comments on that one?
okay.
I don't, Emily, where do you want to leave it with regard to ones like this where we have
Yeah.
split? Is that a problem?
No, it's not a problem in my mind. What we'll do is we'll kind of look at everything as a whole after we get it done. And if it feels like there's some inconsistencies, that'll help us decide, should we push it to this tier or that tier? So what I've heard is kind of mixed, but pretty amenable to either 3 or 2. So we can go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
So fitness center use is the next one. And this again is pay to utilize the fitness center. It's not necessarily taking a class in the fitness center. It's that kind of drop-in use of the equipment in the fitness center. And I'll just share that the reset team had this in tier 5.
Commissioner Richter, go ahead.
Oh, I got my mute off. Amy Richter. I had it in a 3, although I absolutely could be influenced by other people's opinion. I'm not locked to that. I just wanted to share how I approached it. I thought surely, yep, the individual is getting benefit from it. And then I thought having that fitness center as an amenity to the community is a community service, because not everybody is part of, pays due to be part of a fitness club. Not everybody has the workout equipment in their living room. And so that the fact that this was an amenity offered to the community, I gave it a 3. But like I said, I could go with the group.
So Commissioner, thank you for those thoughts. I'm going to give everybody just something to chew on this one. Again, thinking about applying the benefits filter, who is benefiting? So it's anyone who decides to pay the fee for utilization of the fitness center. Don't confuse that with the fact that perhaps the city would choose to make that fee well under market and therefore create greater accessibility for community members. We can deal with accessibility on the fee structure side, but again, if you're thinking about who is benefited and who should pay for the service, the way it's set up right now is individual users pay for the service and they reap the benefit. The availability of it is applying a different filter. Still might be important, but just wanted to share that.
Okay, Commissioner Gualtieri.
Yep, this is Lynn Gualtieri. Emily, that was really helpful. And as you're saying that, and as I'm realizing I was the one who gave that fitness center use a 2, because I think I wasn't thinking about it in its present state. I guess I didn't realize that you had to pay a fee, but sort of more like what Commissioner Richter was saying, maybe, I mean, I think of that as a core benefit, as a core value or whatever, like we should provide that for people. And so that got me thinking about this entire exercise. And I'm not sure if when I was placing these things in these bins, whether I was thinking of what it presently is or what I think it should be. I'm sure that was written somewhere, but you're telling us to think about who benefits, but then sometimes I was thinking about the money, and then it's like, in a way, too many things to think about. That's just my
Yes.
thoughts.
Yes, I can commiserate with you.
Commissioner Richter.
So just to that point, I mean, when I put the lens on it that Emily talked about, I mean, isn't it an individual's benefiting at the core of all of these?
Yes, but I would say to varying degrees, and certainly the community as a whole is benefiting to different degrees on these. Yeah, it's how you slice and dice it.
Commissioner Struck.
Thank you, Peter Struck. I had this one as a 3, a balance in the sense that I get the individual benefit of, working out and having that access. But I also thought, as a community, we benefit. We have a healthier population, and there's benefits to that.
Commissioner McCarthy.
Jody McCarthy. I also had it as a 3. I would be willing to go up to a 4 on that. I agree with what Commissioner Struck just said about having a healthier community overall really does benefit, everyone here. Thank you.
Commissioner Struck, did you have a follow-up? Hey, Commissioner Cohen.
I had this one as a 4. It really seemed different to me than drop-in self-directed sports. Maybe it's because 3 or 4 people shooting hoops, getting together on a casual basis seemed more community oriented and benefiting than fitness center use, which I think would be more predominantly individual.
And this is Commissioner Westberg. I also had this as a 4, primarily because I thought that the overriding benefit was individual, but as several other commissioners have stated, there's also a community benefit here. Sort of, if there wasn't, why would we have installed it in the first place?
Okay, great. I'm going to synthesize by saying we don't have consensus, but we have received good input. I hear your thoughts on this, and so the team will talk about it, and we'll come back with a proposal on where to place it. I largely heard 3s and 4s. Okay, the next one is inclusion services. Let me help define this one. And I'll just be really direct on this. This is the city being required to provide some adaptation of a program or a service to help people with special needs access the services. So this is like meeting your ADA requirements. For that reason, Reset team put this in tier 1.
Commissioner Struck, go ahead.
Yeah, I need to change my vote on this one because I just totally missed the definition. I was a 4, and I can go to a 1. I was kind of a 1/2, but 1 is fine.
This is Commissioner Westberg. I would also put that in a 1. I'm not sure where I put it. Like I said, I don't have my sheet in front of me, but I think I had it as a 2, and I'm not quite sure why. But hearing that explanation, it makes sense to me that it's mostly community benefit.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Next one is mixed age family programs. Again, not necessarily targeting just adults or just kids, but saying anyone, multiple people from a household could participate. And I'll open it up. This could be sports, it could be arts programs, it could be a special event targeting families, for example. It could be a whole host of things.
I wonder if you could
Anyone?
provide a specific example.
Sure, Ryan.
This would be if a commissioner were to sign up for a fishing class with their grandchildren, but not catch any fish. That would be kind of the example that we've had in the past. And I'm not going to ask Commissioner Cohen to speak to that yet. But that's an example. It's a multi-age program. Really bringing families together would be the focus.
I'd say in some communities, they run a whole bunch of intergenerational programs to try to build that sense of community as well. The Reset team put this in tier 3.
Commissioner Cohen, go ahead.
I put, Don Cohen, I put this in 2. I've gone with my grandchildren to fishing. He's right, we caught nothing. We paid some money to do it. We paid some money to go to a soapstone carving thing. It seemed to me that this mixed age family kind of thing really, it wasn't quite in a 1 for me cost wise and everything, but it kind of went fundamentally to an important community value. And coincidentally, somebody mentioned that the council was focused in part on that last night or the other night too. So I was a 2.
Commissioner Struck.
Let's see. Yeah, I believe I just double checking. Yeah, I had a 4, which I think I would go to a 3. Kind of the balance. I look at the adult beginner / intermediate programs, which a little bit different, but kind of the same thing of getting people that learning to fish for your family, learning to play soccer with a small group or something like that. Somewhat similar.
Commissioner Richter.
Amy Richter, I put this one as a 3. Don made some good points about the community that happens when you're bringing families together, cross generation. But I also think you, as an individual, when you're participating in a program, you are getting a benefit for it. So that's why I landed it in 3.
Anyone else? Chair, can I go on?
Please do.
Okay, I heard mostly 3s. P-patch use. This is the program where individuals pay to have access to a plot in the community P-patch, and they have first right to that plot for the next year, the way the program is designed currently. So much like, I'm going to show our card here, much like boat launch, to some degree like fitness center, you pay for access and then you're able to participate. And for that reason, the Reset team put this in tier 5.
Commissioner McCarthy.
Thank you, Jody McCarthy. I'm trying to read my teeny tiny little font on this printout. And I feel like I was on the one that was in 2. And I would be happy with changing that to a 4. That makes sense. I can't remember what my rationale was for that now, but that explanation makes sense to me to change it to a 4. Thank you.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Westberg. I believe I had this at a 3 because I felt that there were definitely some community, substantial amount of community benefit in addition to individual benefit. It utilizes an otherwise unused piece of city property. It's good for individuals' health. It may generate food that finds its way into food banks or other volunteer programs. So I thought that there was some good reasons for that to be of shared benefit, but I could slip it to 4 as well. Commissioner Cohen.
I had it in 4. And I kind of felt there was some value in the, not sure I'm going to say this word right, in the contemplative milieu of that particular activity compared to so many of these other ones. So I didn't put it in a 5 for that reason. So I put it in a 4.
Okay, I'm hearing lots of 4s. We ready for the next?
Go ahead.
Okay, scholarship program. This is, this category of program or service means the city offering some assistance to individuals or families to participate in programs. That makes sense? Okay, Reset team has this in tier 1.
Commissioner Richter.
Amy Richter, just clarifying it. So Emily, it's evaluating the city giving away the scholarship, not the recipient of the scholarship.
That's correct. It's talking about what level of benefit is there and who should pay and what level of city tax support should go toward that. And so play this out and you said, scholarship program, we think it's very individualized benefit, which you can make that argument. Then that would mean that you were putting it at tier 5, which is going to have a much higher cost recovery, which means you're actually charging people to participate in the program, or you're saying there's going to be 0 tax support to the program?
Commissioner Struck.
Yes, Peter Struck. I had this as a 3, but as I've contemplated a little bit more, I would be willing to move it to a 1. Because I think that as we go through this overall process, and I know we're looking right now just at benefit, but at some point you got to look at, who pays and so forth. And I think that having a robust scholarship program for those that, can't afford, various programs, et cetera, allows you to say, well, our market charge, if you will, is X, but, if you can't afford that, we've got this program, if you qualify. So I think having a robust scholarship program really is kind of a net benefit to the community, both from fiscal sustainability as well as equity and inclusion.
Commissioner McCarthy.
Jody McCarthy, I had it as a 2, but I agree that it could be a 1, and I would be happy to change to that. Thank you.
Commissioner Cohen.
I had it as a 3, but on reflection in light of this, I don't think I could go to a 1, but I would go to a 2.
Commissioner Richter.
Amy Richter, I had it as a 2. I feel good about having it there. Important for a community to do to promote equity inclusion, but it doesn't feel like it belongs so far on the right to me. Or excuse me, on the left for mostly community benefit. So I'm a 2.
Thank you. All right, I heard mixed bag on 1s and 2s there. So that's another one Reset team will contemplate. And then the last one where we had a lot of split votes is therapeutic, adaptive, specialized recreation services. These are programs that or services that are specifically designed to provide activities or help to people that have special needs.
So how is this different than inclusion services?
This is different than inclusion services because inclusion services would means you want to participate in a basketball program, for example, but you're in a wheelchair. You know, how do we help accommodate that as opposed to running an adaptive recreation or specialized recreation class that is wheelchair basketball, where
Ryan,
all
can you
participants are.
provide some examples?
Yes, Ryan Daly, operations team or transition team manager. You could look at our senior social program, could be one of them. It's an adapted program specific to seniors who may have mobility challenges. I'd ask Katie Herzog to provide an example on our specialized recreation services if she's available.
Yeah, so we had, it was kind of a fitness-based specialized recreation program that was provided for primarily youth, but parents and high school teachers had come to us saying there's really not much on the island for that population outside of school. So we were able to offer a distinct specialized recreation fitness program where they could come work out all together and have activities that were, you know, for all of their skill sets.
Thank you. I would also add in our previous lists of program offerings, this may have been the lightest. It wasn't something that we offered a full array of programs on. We often partnered with maybe other providers or even the city of Bellevue to provide some of these services.
So we had pretty good clustering around tier 3, but I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to talk about it because we did have an array of tiers in play here.
I mean,
Did I say
tier 2?
Tier 2, yeah.
Oh, sorry, tier 2.
Commissioner Stark.
And that's where the reset team put it as well, tier 2.
Yeah. Thank you, Roy. Peter Struck. So I was a 4. I'm happy to go to a 2.
Commissioner McCarthy.
Jody McCarthy, I am not sure what I was, but I feel like I was a 3 or a 4 on that one. And I feel like a 3 is a fair assessment of that one still, because, you know, it's pretty specific to a specific group that's getting the benefit of that. So I would say that would be like a half and half on those particular programs. So I'm happy to stay with a 3. Thanks.
Commissioner Richter.
Amy Richter. I actually had this at a 2, but after hearing the feedback, I'm sort of leaning more towards 3 because it is a specific individual, but I also think, you know, responsibility of the community to provide diverse set of offerings for all audiences. But I'm leaning on the 3 side.
Commissioner Struck. Okay, I see no further hands raised, so.
Okay, great. I heard mixes of 3s and 2s on that one. So again, that's one we will talk about. In the interest of time, I'm I'm going to ask if there are any questions or input that you want to provide on those three next services: senior transportation, exclusive use of park shelter field rental, or equipment rental. And I will share with you on each of those where we place them. Senior transportation reset team had in tier 3, and exclusive use we had in what tier? Ryan, do you see it? Oh, here it is, tier 4. And equipment rentals we had on tier 5.
Commissioner Richter.
Emily, this is Amy Richter. The reset committee gave it a 4, not a 5 for the exclusive use. I'd just be interested in hearing thought behind that, because to me, when I hear exclusive, that is only individual. And the exclusive, and that they might not even live on the community. They may not live within Mercer Island community.
Yes, thanks for asking that. Ours is nuanced in that we put the exclusive use of the community and event center in tier 5, but we put the park shelter field rental in tier 4. I think part of our thought process on that was you have these outdoor amenities, you want to have good use of them. And there's sort of opportunity cost if there's not. Believing that ultimately the kind of cost recovery equation on that looks a little different than it would be for use of the community event center. Ryan, anything you want to add?
Yes, I would just add that this is one of the things, at least in my, when I was thinking through this exercise, this was a key one that I looked at our tiered system of the fee structure, thinking about, the exclusive use. Obviously, when I explained this, I think individually to all of you, I was using a more rigid explanation of exclusive. In this standpoint, it's whatever user group is exclusively using it. It could be the Boys and Girls Club, it could be the JCC, it could be Microsoft, it could be a variety, and we would have a tiered structure for the fees that go around that. But we do still think that there is, at least my feeling around this was, there is some level of community benefit to having that opportunity. But obviously the individual is benefiting above what the community may be. So.
Commissioner Richter.
Yeah, Amy Richter, and hearing Ryan's explanation, it definitely moves me more to a 4, perhaps even to a 3.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Westberg. I want to make a comment on equipment rentals because it was one I had a question on, exactly what that represented. And I talked to Ryan about it, and largely that's rentals associated with the community and event center private events. So to me, it made sense to align it with a 5, which is where we put the community center rentals.
Yes, I think that's correct. That's where the bulk of the available equipment for rental resides, is on the event center side of the house. In some communities, they may make available yoga mats or those big buckets of basketballs for private basketball leagues to utilize, so they don't have to bring them back and forth across different facilities. So there are other examples, but in Mercer Island, the vast majority of the equipment that's available to be rented today is on the event center side.
Commissioner Struck.
Yes, Peter Struck. So on the equipment rentals, I was originally a 4, but thinking about it some more and hearing the discussion, I'm happy to move it to a 5.
Commissioner McCarthy.
Jody McCarthy, I am the same as Commissioner Struck. I was a 4, but on equipment rentals. But hearing all the explanations, I go to a 5 on that one as well. For senior transportation, I was a 3, and I am still a 3 because I think that that is a pretty balanced benefit to the community and also to the individual on that one. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else want to weigh in on any of these or ask any clarifying questions? And then I guess, Ryan, I have a question for you, and that's, are we turning into a pumpkin right now?
I don't see any other questions, so why don't you guys go ahead and figure out or let us know what the next steps are. And
Okay, really good. Really good. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to very quickly, believing that we can spend just 2 minutes on the next steps, speed through the rest of the slides. I'm going to flash at you ultimately what we're going to try to arrive at. This is the reset team's pyramid. I read off these results to you. The things that were in red were things where the reset team wasn't aligned perfectly with all of you, but we placed those items in an adjacent tier. So we're not far off. So those will be other places where we'll kind of talk as a team and say, where should this land when we look at everything as a whole? We are in the process right now of helping to define exactly what we're going to mean going forward about direct costs. So we will come back to you with that information. I also want to be clear that there is work that has to be done in order to successfully implement this model going forward. We have to build up our capability to do a little bit more cost accounting. So that's something the team is talking about as well. I also wanted to be clear on indirect and direct costs that we will look for places where perhaps fee structures would help us to recover some of the indirect costs in order to reduce the reliance on tax resources going forward. We chatted about the fact that the placement on the pyramid is not synonymous with the scale of the fee. That fee structure is something we will be doing next. But each tier on the cost recovery resource allocation pyramid will come with a target for revenue recovery and or cost recovery. This is just a table that helps you to see there is variety across the country of the levels of cost recovery that we see as targets. And we looked at this. These are all entities that have developed similar structures. They've used the Green Play model. And down at the bottom, you see us kind of revealing what we think our recommendation might be on cost recovery. Most of these communities set minimum goals, and they're minimum goals at the tier level. So all of those programs and services that we talked about being in tier 3, for example, we would look as a group to make sure that those programs and services are bringing in a minimum of 75. There might be a particular program that we know that's a stretch for, but another program that we think can make up the difference that lives within that same benefit level on the pyramid. So we put that, just on the pyramid so that you could see it in this way. That'll be something we come back and talk with you about again as we build that out. We think these targets are appropriate. They're consistent with what we see elsewhere, and we think they're achievable. We've gone back and looked at some data from past program and service offerings, and we think this is doable. But this is definitely one of those places where we will revisit as we go, as we set the actual fees, and as we see what sort of participation we get from programs, or how the costs of delivering programs or services changes. We may need to think about bumping a program or service from one part of the pyramid to another, or making these adjustments to the minimums. And so our next steps will be to start focusing on the fee structure. And I've just put down some possible goals that we'll have as we think about what should the fee be for these types of services and programs. There's a lot of different ways to think about fee structure and different reasons why you would set a fee at a particular place. So we will be having those discussions. There are also strategies, holistic strategies that cities use when they're developing their fee structure. And I've listed those at the bottom of this slide. We will be looking at 3 out of those 4. Arbitrary was in some way, a way I think the city had developed its cost recovery structure in the past. It had an overall goal for the whole recreation side of the house, or for the community center facility as a whole. Arbitrary kind of has a negative tone to it, but it just meant they picked a number. And we're going to be using those latter 3 more. So we're going to look at what does market tell us? What's reasonable in the market? What's the competitor basis for this? And then certainly what is maybe appropriate or necessary in order for us to achieve our cost recovery structure goals. What do we need a program in tier 5 to generate in order to provide the services that are in tier 1 or 2, for example? Okay, and then just a reminder on our project schedule, lots of upcoming opportunities for public input and more discussion. The next big item will be the workshop in February, and that's when we'll share the Let's Talk survey results, and we will begin sharing what we're learning from the fee study, and hopefully provide some recommendations along those lines. And then we will start talking with you about what we think we might be able to offer in terms of programs and services beginning in the fall. As you know, we have the immediate action plan, which is about gearing up to provide summer camp this summer, but we're going to start now looking beyond that. And that means also having some discussions about what resources will be needed and dependent on council approval in order to provide those services. So, with all that, I wanted to say thank you for all your good work and your time.
I think we have
Happy
one
to
question.
answer any questions.
Commissioner Cohen.
Yes, this is Don Cohen. Just so I can be thinking about this, even though it's the next stage, the slide you showed that had like for some jurisdictions, 150%, 200%, just conceptually, that means that there's significant tax support and user fee support. Is that right?
No, in those cases, it would mean that there's limited tax support and that the program is actually recovering more, it's generating more revenue than it costs the city to provide.
Okay, thank you.
So for example, and these are just made up numbers, if it costs us $50 in kind of custodial services to get a room prepared and then cleaned up afterwards for a group to use, but we're charging $100 for use of that, that has a high cost recovery and may have zero tax support because of that revenue. But that may enable us to provide those other programs that need more tax, either need more tax support or cost more.
Commissioner Gualtieri.
Yep, this is Lynn Gualtieri. Is the fee study fee structure study something that the staff is going to do, or are we going to be involved in that, or are we going to just be briefed on it?
Yes, largely it's going to be what the staff does. So we're going to follow classic design on that, where we go out and we gather data from kind of private market, other cities, look at their fee structures, fee related policies, and then let that inform what Mercer Island should be. And along with those other things I talked about, like our cost recovery model. And the city has its past fees, and so we will also be keeping that in mind. And in the past, the city manager has had the municipal code authority to approve a fee schedule. And I don't think it's talking out of school here. She really wants us to engage all of you and the city council in that conversation, so that you can really understand why the fees have been set the way that they are, and even, you know, lend some input, blessing, whatever you want to call it, so that we can arrive at a good fee structure.
This is Commissioner Westberg. I have just two quick questions. One, can we get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation?
Absolutely, it's on your way.
Okay, great.
Yes, I will send it immediately after this meeting. And then in the packet for the public as well.
And then my second question was going to be, will you be sending out something that shows kind of what the final decision is with regard to where those activities fall in the various tiers?
Yes, I want to talk with the team and discuss when might be the right point and time to do that, if it's one of the upcoming meetings or not until the next workshop. But absolutely, we will be sending you something, and we will make sure that that's out and available to the public as well.
Thank you very much. And Commissioner Struck as a final question.
Yeah, thank you, Peter Stark. So just one thing, I think I looked at some of the Green Place studies, like for Redmond and Corvallis and so forth. They did a really good job. One table that I found really valuable is that they, you know, divided by tier, depending on what you put into each tier. You know, what are the direct costs or the total costs for each tier, so you kind of get a sense. And then based in other cities, which I assume Mercer Island will be very similar, is, you know, most of the costs reside in tier 1 and 2. And, you know, obviously, as we just talked about, that's has the largest tax support and so forth. But I think that'll be helpful just to kind of see that broken out somewhere down the line. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. If not, we are about to adjourn. The next regular meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission is scheduled for February 4th at 5:30. The time is now 7:42. I'm sorry, we ran late. And the meeting is adjourned. However, as a reminder to the commissioners, please stay seated until the city staff has terminated the Zoom broadcast. Stay healthy, and see everybody on February 4th.